Here we go. We are ready to roll. Pour us our Weller. By the way, anybody knows anybody at Buffalo Trace, just give them a call. I could use a sponsor, right? All right. So we have one question from Clay between cut, stack, and burn. Which is your favorite? Um, Anybody who jumps on, be sure and answer in the comments for yourself what your favorite at Bonfire is. Um, as we've got one answer already being stack, and says stack for me. I enjoy being with the other crews and meeting and talking with them, which is one of the cool things for me to watch. I don't know. I think if you were to ask me what my favorite thing of Bonfire is as an observer, yeah, maybe I don't know, maybe it's stack for that reason, to watch the crews who've been working individually in their own groups coming together. And I've heard from lots of participants that that's the moment that they realize that all this that they've been doing um, is it doesn't necessarily click what exactly is all of this leading towards until you're out at stack and you're working together. um, and and so that is fun to watch. It's fun to see that click. Of course, um, I have a fondness for stack. I was um, myself head stack in 03 and 04. But cut's good too. I love cut um, for what it brings out of you, and for that that learning curve experience. Um, uh, but load, we can't forget load. There's that other component. Load is yeah. So I love load too. I think it's pretty much equal across the board. I will say this: my least favorite thing is probably burn. That's probably my least favorite thing. Um, it it is my when burn starts to happen. Sure, that's outstanding, and I love watching how much it motivates people. I love that literal light in people's eyes when bonfire's burning. But uh, then I kind of remember that the best part was everything that happened before. But then all of a sudden, I start liking burn again when it starts to set in that this is the first step for building the next bonfire, and then I start to like burn again. Not to say I don't like burn. I'm just saying of all the outstanding things, my least favorite is burn. Everything else is tied for first. That's enough of that. Let's go ahead and get started um, with what you all came here for. We're going to look at digging the perimeter pole holes, and let's go ahead and pause this. The perimeter pole holes and setting Centerpole for Bonfire 2020. There we go. So, once again, those of you who've joined this before, you're familiar. This is the part where I pretend like now is where we're starting, and we edit this for later for all the replays. You can replay all of these later. They're up on the YouTube channel. Subscribe, follow, share. But here we go. Howdy, eggs. Welcome to another session of Good Bull. While we're culling photos from Student Bonfire 2020, this is digging perimeter pole holes and ultimately setting Centerpole. And we're starting here. This is actually shortly after Centerpole has been brought in. This is Wednesday the 21st that Centerpole was brought in. Um, the the announcement of who the perimeter pole crews was made. Um, one dorm was roundly yelled at and berated by the junior red pots. That was FHK. They were sent away and to campus, and then it was there that they were told that they had earned Centerpole. Everybody else hung around and dug the holes for perimeter poles. So we're going to start with the perimeter pole that, sure, yeah, it's Walton's perimeter pole, so of course I come from Walton, and maybe that's the reason why I started there. It's also possible that the reason why I started there is that's where the beautiful sunset backdrop was up against. So here's Walton's yellow pot beginning the hole. Um, and I wanted to get everybody working on their holes. It's an honor and a privilege and a real recognition of a crew's contributions to the season um, when they are awarded perimeter poles. And so I do try and take every opportunity that I can to capture the crews at their perimeter poles, be it at their actual perimeter poles or preparing their perimeter poles. And so here's Walton, one of the perimeter pole crews. And we're starting to get into uh, that that time of night where the light becomes a real challenge. And this this is always a really edgy time of the year for me when it comes to taking the photos, because it's all of a sudden, without warning, a completely different, without preparation, a completely different mode of taking photos. So there's still enough ambient light here where I can take a nice, um, relatively crisp photo, and we're going to see very quickly that the light is going, and um, we're not getting all the clarity, but that does open up the door for um, slowing the shutter down a little bit and being able to capture a little bit more movement. It still, though, it always makes me sweat. Always makes me sweat a little bit. It takes a good while to get used to, and the thing is that about the time that I get used to taking photos with such little light and only the perimeter pole lights available, about the time that I get used to that, that's about the time that stack is big enough that that light um, starts bouncing off of stack, and um, we stop losing so much of that light. Um, and that's something that I learned very quickly, that within the first season, 2 seasons, that stack and the entire stack site without a stack in the middle of it, um, the light just disappears, um, goes off into the pasture, into the fields, and you can't do anything with it. But once stack gets big enough, it bounces all of that light back, and and it becomes a very bright place. But until there's stack there to reflect the light, it's pretty dark. So I'm actually pretty happy with some of these that I've gotten from Walton so far. Again, starting with this light in the background, and still a little bit more available light. I'm hoping that this is going to bode well for the rest of stack season. Um, Here we are over at Kruger's pole. Really, this is actually my second favorite corner to shoot, for, I think, what's obvious reasons, having the Aggie Bonfire trailer there in the background. So, and of course, obviously, Kruger digging this hole. This is Kruger's. Kruger earned a perimeter pole. And the holes start to form pretty quickly, especially over here at this corner. This is actually probably the easiest corner to dig as well. None of them are particularly easy, but it's of all the holes to dig, this is probably the easiest. What we're also going to see is that I'm going to be bringing a lot of this light back in these shots. So I'll show you a few examples that I didn't want to shoot in such a way as to introduce uh, grain or create a poor quality end photo. Um, so I did underexpose and take advantage of the D750 sensor and its ability to kind of come back from underexposure. See, that's me talking like I actually know photography gear. So here's the Kruger yellow pot, um, digging his hole, his cruise hole. And what you're going to see is, as we go through these, is that um, it is not the case that only the crew that earns the pole um, digs the hole. You're going to see other crews participating in digging the holes. So we're going to jump up to Neely. There's some other ones. There's some other ones that turned out much better at Kruger, I believe. We're over at Neely. Neely's chief digging. I believe Lechner helping them. And you see that the pots get involved with the digging. So the pickaxes are loosening things up, and the pots are what's removing the material. Here's the core's perimeter pole hole. What we're going to see from the core too is that the core apparently just loves digging holes so much that they are we're going to see them put together a pretty impressive fire pit as well. And so the core always has, well, when the core earns a perimeter pole, the core always has a very impressive fire pit, huge. And what was done this year, which is what used to be done, and at some point it changed, and they've changed it back, but it used to be if somebody dug their perimeter fires early, their perimeter fire pits, if they dug those before the season, here I'll show you whereabouts. This is not a great photo. We're not going to use this one, but just for illustration, it's back here that they would usually, or in the past few years, would dig their perimeter fire hole directly behind the light pole. And it's fine if you dig that hole there after Centerpole is set, but what would happen is that they would dig those holes before Centerpole was set. And when we look at Centerpole and raising Centerpole, we're going to look at that tonight when we're done with these. You're going to see that there's ropes involved. And when a fire pit was placed right behind the light pole, the rope to pull and straighten Centerpole could not pull straight out. It would have to pull at an angle this way, which wasn't ideal. So in any event, they moved it off to the side, and what we'll find a little bit later, spoiler alert, when we look at some photos from actually stack starting, and I went out there to visit last night, the Corps relocated that huge colossal pit that they spent this entire night digging. They filled it in and started a new one, just to move it a little bit closer to behind the pole. So maybe what will happen by next year is that they'll wait to dig that pit until after perimeter or after Centerpole is set. So we see the core's already made some pretty good progress. Here's one of the butt pots. A light shining into the hole to mark, or to kind of show where the digging is happening. I've really appreciated the nature of the light that's been provided these past, I guess the second year now. They went out and they got LED lights, and so the temperature of the light is much more consistent now around stack. I always struggled with the light in one corner being sort of greenish, and then in another corner being very having magenta, or another corner being very yellow, and that's very frustrating when it comes to actually developing the photos, and would at least double the amount of time that I had to spend developing the photos, because the character of the light was so different from place to place. But now they got these nice LEDs and everything is about the same temperature, so you're going to get the same tone from the photos wherever you are. So here we are back to Walton, and what we're seeing is the hole's getting big enough that bodies are being lowered down into the hole a little bit. Getting an idea here of just how much progress is being made. I like this one. I do like this one. And this is what we mean by lowering down into the holes there. Now we see that the hole is sloping back. It's straight down in the front, but it's got a slope on the back side, and that's to accommodate the slope away from stack of the perimeter poles. The perimeter poles sort of lean against the ropes. And here we are back at Kruger, and I feel like I remember there being some pretty cool ones over here. I do like this one. It was when I was taking this photo, so they treat digging the perimeter pole holes the same way they treat swinging on a tree, where before you start swinging with your pickaxe, you're supposed to call clear, and everybody around you is supposed to echo your clear, indicating that everybody is out of the way of the pickaxe. And so he was already in motion when I walked up, and already had an idea of where his pickaxe was and where he was swinging for, and the hole and everything. So I just got in a position I wanted to be in for the photo, and then I heard over my shoulder one of the junior red pots, "You're not clear, Dion." That's what he said. But I got the photos I wanted, so and so at this point the yellow pot has backed off from digging, and everybody is getting after that. I like this one more from directly above, and we see how enthusiastic everybody is for getting after that dirt and clearing out that hole. Here we are at Neely's pole. So we kind of visited them a little bit earlier on the first lap. This is where we're actually getting some shots that are turning out pretty cool here. I'm going to bring this one back. I don't think this one's going to work great, but no, I think that first one does it. But we see there's at every step, everything that Bonfire does is let's think of the easy way to do this, and then let's think of the hardest, most immersive way of doing this, and then let's do it like that. And so that's the way it is with perimeter pole holes as well. So it really, at this point, the holes are really just still started. Um, it's there's going to be a lot of digging involved, and in fact, I hung around to get just a fair uh, representation of everybody, and their holes, and um, that they earned, and that that distinguishing honor that they've earned in having a perimeter pole. So I hung around long enough to catch that, but I did get home and get to bed long before they would have been finished. So as long as I have a daily 9 to 5, we're probably not going to see the entirety of digging perimeter poles. But we got a fair bit of it. Here's Hart helping. Hey, we see these are not a whole heck of a lot of light available here. This is Hart helping, actually. Hart helping with one of the fire pits. And a look at Centerpole standing there in the middle. Again, this is the day that Centerpole was brought in. So it's just sitting there. It has not been rigged up yet. It doesn't have any of the collars or anything like that. We're only about 60 more exposures away, shots away from raising Centerpole. So we're getting up to raising Centerpole pretty quick. If you want to share that and what that looks like with everybody, now would be the time to share the link to the stream here. Get your buddies motivated, show your family what you've been up to, get former students motivated for what current students are still doing. Go ahead and share that link to the live stream, because we are just a few dozen more shots away from Centerpole raising, and I think it was a good raising. It was a good night. So it was about here when I was taking this photo, and we see I've taken a lot of this photo, but it just kind of struck me. It was, and I think I sent out a tweet about this time too, that um, in this year that's been so strange and just I don't know, not normal, and certainly to many people, well, to everybody really, a lot of negativity attached to it, and things that aren't familiar, and things that we get used to, that we expect to see and experience every year at this time. um, I know that my years, I've completely lost track of time. I have no conception of time whatsoever anymore, because I'm used to certain things: the spring training baseball season, the Tour de France, and football starting, and these sorts of things that help me understand the year. Birthday parties for my kids, or summer barbecue, all these things that help me progress mentally through the year time wise. For me, it's just gone. I don't understand any of it anymore. I can't believe that it's almost November already. And it was sitting here taking these photos, and entering this new stage of Bonfire, that for the first time this year, I felt something that was familiar and normal and comfortable. And I don't know, if for nobody else than just myself, I kind of stopped here for a while and took a lot of different frames of um, this general angle here. Um, so some of the photos, they're intended to be something. And sometimes I'm just taking photos um, because I want to remember something for myself. And that, these here, I, I don't think there's a lot of artistic or distinguishing merit about them, but for me, it was just I wanted to capture this moment that, bam, this is familiar, this is normal, and I feel really good about what's happening right now. So here's a heart standing with a Neely with a bonfire bouquet. We'll see these pop up. Not sure if the proposal was ever made. People make proposals for bonfire dates or some such. Ace has been proposed to a number of times, so obviously a very serious business. Kruger's hole, and we see we're getting pretty deep at this point. And what I wanted to get here, uh, it it struck me how dirty people were getting, and I wanted to get that, and I also wanted to get that um, they're happy this way. This is the bonfire building Aggie is in their element in this way. This is one of the brown pots actually pitching in. Lots of progress being made over here. We're back over at the core. When things start getting dark, um, like a moth, I am drawn to whatever light is available. And he's got his flashlight there, shining down into the hole. Here's how they measure. Tape measure with a tool serving as a weight taped to the bottom. There's your T-post to reference the surface, and they're going to come back and check that progress throughout the night. Like I said, we're doing a lot to bring back light here, but I do also like, you can be limited by not having a lot of light, or you can use not having a lot of light as a tool to kind of make the impression. Because the fact of the matter is if I added light, if I added too much light, that's not what I'm seeing right now. I'm in an environment that's very dark with very stark light, and that's what I'm seeing. So if I add too much light, I could wind up taking photos that don't actually represent what's going on. We're going to see a little bit at Centerpole Raising, which is again just a few shots away. Um, that I did work on adding some light in that environment, and I hope that I did it in a way that didn't change what we were looking at. And we're back over at we're at the core again. And there's one of the Junior Red Pots who has walked up on the scene to survey. And I wanted to kind of get that layer to those people who would recognize that handle. Um, they'll recognize that this is a moment where a Junior Red Pot has showed up on the scene to check progress. And so that's what I'm going after here. There was a flashlight there. I was hoping that they would put that more directly on him, but they didn't. There was no need to put it on him. Of course, it doesn't matter what he looks like. It's they're pointing it at the bottom of the hole. But I was hoping if I stuck around for a little bit that it would wind up shining on him, and it didn't. But there's a few in there, so we're going to use one of those. And we are now moving into Centerpole raising. So going to take one more second, pass it back. We're at Centerpole raising. So we're gonna look at what Centerpole going in was like. We're actually going to start a little bit early and see what some of the preparations look like. But shortly before the truck arrived, a little welding, a little running ropes, and then getting to raising Centerpole and a little Centerpole. So again, go ahead and get everybody motivated for that. Share the stream, share the link, and we are going to jump into it now with a Junior Red Pot tacking in the red ropes. So the red ropes are a relatively new addition. This will be the third stack with the red ropes. And what had happened, a lot of people will recall the hemp ropes. In fact, let's take a moment and look for, this is Bonfire's turnover rate, right? Like if Bonfire turns over its leadership and its participants, 25% per year, 100% of the participants in 4 years. So there are things that if you've seen them a few times, you can tend to believe that that's the way that it always was, when in reality the changes are relatively recent. And so this is Bonfire 2017, the last stack that was constructed completely with the hemp ropes. And so we see here these perimeter pole ropes, and this is in 2017. But we see those ropes coming from the poles, these brown ropes, and they're wrapped around Centerpole. I believe we have a closer view in 2017. I think I stopped to get a closer view of the axe handles. I might not have did. It might have been 2016 that I did that. Well, here's a little bit closer. So we see here the axe handle. Here's some wire. You can barely make it out. And so the hemp ropes were what was used, and they were even implemented in 2018. But I don't know if it was a change in manufacturing. I don't know if the quality of the materials became different or whatever, but there was very quickly after the ropes were installed in 2018, there was some compromise to the ropes at the point where they were being tightened, and it was decided that wasn't something that could be allowed for the rest of even that stack. And the solution that was provided by an outstanding supporter of Bonfire in Jim Bowes, one one of my old gray pod buddies, um, who erects towers and runs rigging and erects monumental, huge towers, and works with materials like this and loads like this all the time. He kind of applied his expertise and provided the red ropes that are being used here, which don't have the stretch, so that they don't have to be tightened with the axe handles. They convey the forces in a way that is desirable, um, and they've just proven to be a really, really great, reliable setup, and one that is very, very simple. That as changes are made to structures, um, what what tends to happen with systems is that changes are introduced that are always in the best interest of safety, always with the best intentions in mind, that are actually increasing complexity in what was a simple system. And with the introduction of these red ropes, the system became simpler, not more complicated, and that is unusual in the evolution of a system. Systems tend to get more complex, and it's when they get too complex that they eventually fail. And so seeing this red rope solution, it's a very elegant one, and I'm very impressed by it. And again, it's proven to be a great system. So here's the best attempt that you're going to see at fish wrap. That was a thing that used to be done where you would take the ropes and run them away from those hemp ropes and run them away from Centerpole as fast as possible until you run out of rope and it pulled you over. Well, now they're just running the white uh, log ropes, and so you're not going to get the exciting um, fish wrap effect anymore. But we see that these ropes are very long. And these freshmen are just pulling these ropes as far away straight out, and then the ropes are going to be organized more, um, um, organized better for when the pole goes up in the air. Here I caught a pot, just pot. Where am I from? All of a sudden, I caught a pot over here, the NSW, what would be considered the core wide butt pot. Introduced again when the Corps recognized that it was in their best interest to, continue to allow all the crews to operate individually, all the outfits to operate as outfits, but to organize all of their communication and recruitment efforts to kind of consolidate them into NSW and CLH. Nathan Scott West and Christopher Lee Hurd, two of those who passed in '99. So I'm gonna caption one of those. We see back in the background, Cookie Shack, skids, little edge there of the Corps' pit, and there's welding in progress on one of the tamps. And I like playing around with photos of welding. The tamps, what we're going to see, the tamps is what is going to mash that dirt down into the hole once Centerpole goes into it. And this is one of the juniors welding that together. This is what I was occupied with, while unbeknownst to me, the truck was arriving early. I say early, the truck was arriving on time, which to my expectations was early. Overdid that, but I like playing with welding. So we catch those tamps, the flat part of the tamp being attached there, and I was just over here playing around. I didn't expect the truck to be arriving so soon. So we see, in order to get that weld, uh, the weld is very, very bright. And so I was exposing generally for the weld and for the reflection on the mask, which meant that I had to dial things back in such a way that the clouds in the background appeared much darker than they actually were. But again, representing one of the many things that has to happen that isn't necessarily, you don't think that, you don't think of all of these other sorts of things that had to happen to get ready. You can't put in Centerpole if you don't have tamps, and you can't have tamps if you haven't taken the time uh, to lay down some good welds on the bottom of these tamps. And like I said, I was so engrossed in this that I turned around and there was the truck already. And I do usually try and get the truck driving into perimeter, but that didn't happen this year. But we did get some shots representing some of the other things that have to happen. The truck, as every year, is batten drilling. Batten drilling is very generous with their time and talent, um, and resources, and bringing their trucks out here every year to set Centerpole. And for anybody who might be watching who's not um, for anybody who might be watching who's not familiar with um, the process of tamping Centerpole, what you're going to see is that once you start watching what tamping and setting Centerpole looks like, and keeping in mind that there is a very expensive truck there with people who are skilled, who are being paid to be there, you're going to realize just how generous batten drilling is, because they spend a lot more time here than they would spend on anything else, because they want Bonfire to be able to do this job in the way that Bonfire sees fit to do it. So here's one of the previous reds, providing a little insight and information. This was last year's head stack, providing some wisdom to the junior red pots in advance of all this happening. This is, of course, the whole year you've got stuff to do, but this is kind of one of those moments where inside perimeter what's happening is it's really starting to, your awareness that it is starting to hit the fan is starting to kick in. And so there's a sense of, uh, tightening the focus and honing in on what is about to happen, not just with Centerpole but with Bonfire at large. It so that there's a I don't know, there's just kind of a mood, a tone that is different, and it's kind of a change, a moment that you can say this is where the attitude is changing. For me, I really feel like that biggest change, that biggest moment, outside of before cut class or going into the woods for first cut or for anything else, it's when the truck arrives, and it's like at the top of a roller coaster. It's that sort of feeling. So the flag was presenting itself kind of nicely, and I was trying to get that, and I did not. But there was other stuff to do, so I stopped shooting at it. Here we see some brown pots have left their mark on this cap. This is the Centerpole cap. Again, a photo without necessarily much artistic merit, but one of those photos for posterity's sake. So the boom has been raised here. We see the bits are still on the trailer, so we're not I'm not quite there yet, but they're getting everything in place. A nice new, I don't know, I'm sure that there's a drilling word for that. I don't know what it is, but the point here, nice new little piece. I think it's usually a little bit older and more worn out. Batten drilling is very busy. It was, I remember 2014. Um, we see here. Let's look at what the light looks like here. It's still plenty bright, and we're gonna have a look here at what the situation was in 2014. So this is Centerpole raising. Everybody's out there about the same time as expected. Here we see ESPN's writer and photographer. They're excitedly waiting for Centerpole to arrive, or for the truck to arrive to set Centerpole. It is 5:40 in the evening. Still nice and light. And here is the truck arriving. At nearly 8 o'clock, the truck is pulling in. So there was great worry that is the truck even going to get here? The first bit of dirt in 2014 was coming out at 7:55 and 28 seconds. So there was a great bit of worry from these people who were there to tell this story and take photos and observe that it was almost 8 o'clock. And the reason why is because Batten Drilling had been, to my knowledge, they'd been out at Kyle Field setting the footings for the Kyle Field expansion. And so, I mean, probably the most red-ass motivating day for any company in Aggieland probably ever. They went from setting the footings for an expanding Kyle Field to coming out to stack. Point being, Batten is very, very busy. And so for me, it's just me. I just noticed, hey, that's a fancy new shiny little bit there for Batten being as busy as they always are. Probably wore the other one out pretty. So they're getting things lined up, getting the auger attached. In the meantime, back behind, and this is another one of the things about shooting Centerpole unload, is that there's so much stuff that's going on, and you want to kind of get all of it, but there's a lot of people doing a lot of things. Here they're laying out these red ropes, which they take very special care to keep out of the dirt. So to keep it from being abraded. And so here they are laying it down on these on the plywood to keep them from getting in that mud and dirt. In the meantime, you've got, everybody's taking their last moments before things really kick off to get their photos together as crews here nearly next to their perimeter pole. Kruger getting some downtime in their fire pit. These are the plumb bobs. So you set up these tripods with fence posts, hang from them a plumb, a weighted plumb attached to some string, and we'll see some photos of what the purpose of that is. But that's for keeping it plumb, and we'll see how they use that to monitor the up and down situation on the on the center pole. Here they are pulling another bundle of the red rope out of the bag. And we had a pleasant surprise visit from Andrew Pikowski um, for this uh, for this center pole raising, and it was a surprise when I saw him there. And he'd actually messaged before that he was thinking about coming out. And Andrew Pikowski was head stack in 2014, that stack that we just looked at. And so at first I was surprised, and then I remembered he was from FHK, so of course he's there. His old crew is there in Centerpole, so he was there to be there for that. But he did remark on, shouldn't these boys already have these ropes done? Why are they just now doing the ropes? And this is just one of the cool things that happens when you've built it before and you come back and out of necessity or discovery or whatever it is, new things are learned and new systems are adopted, um, or changed or adapted. So, this is a new rope, it's a new material, and it used to be that you could and should and were fully expected to, with consequences, to have the ropes already done and laid out. But with this new rope and this new material, the process has changed, and it is by necessity something that you can't lay these ropes out the day before, and have them laying in the dirt, or if it rains or anything like that, and getting muddy and abraded. So just one of those differences, and maybe a change to the experience, but then again, it's a semantic change. It's not actually um, any kind of fundamental shift to the processes. But to anybody who's been through the processes, those processes are very, very important. How come the ropes aren't laid out right now? Why are we just now doing this? But I have always appreciated uh, how the dead red pots, as they're called, and dead leadership, dead chiefs, brown pots. I've always appreciated the respect that they show the current students when they come back. You don't get a lot of, why are you doing it this way? You're wrong. Um, there's always this. They're always treated with the respect that there must be a reason why you're doing this, and so I would like to know what it is. Um, but I think it speaks to the experience. When you've had the experience, that you've been through it. You know that there's a reason for every decision that you make, and so when you come back, you know that there must be a reason for the decisions they're making. And it's just very cool to see that there's not this coming back and saying you should do it exactly the way we did it. Now here's the junior red pot. This is the junior red pot head stack, who is closely watching as the bit is aligned with this marker here, which will be the center pole. And this marker here is formerly what we saw Bonfire 2020. This is perimeter before it all kicked off. That is the marker for center pole we see in the distance. There is Kruger's perimeter pole marker. There's the light pole marker. So, for those of you who are tapping in, who haven't, weren't part of this season, who didn't build it this season, you can see how far in advance everything, all of this architecture was laid out far before we ever got to the Centerpole raising that we're looking at. This was back in mid-September, late September, and these were in the ground far before that. But we see here, here's where we are now in the middle of that perimeter that was starting to be overgrown with grass. Right now it's stripped bare, and that is that exact marker in that exact precise spot that they're dropping the bit on. And Jacob, the junior head stack, we're going to see here a distinguishing quality that we will find in Jacob that I've certainly found is that he is incredibly meticulous and precise. And whereas some people would say, that's good enough, um, Jacob made it. I mean, right on top, dead center of that, and good for him. Good for him. He wasn't going to let him get away with close. So that's actually what I was trying to get at with this photo, was not necessarily, hey, here's the auger and it's going on a spot here. That's a threaded bolt with some tape on top of it. It's the auger and it's going in. What I'm taking a picture of here is a very meticulous and deliberate and purposeful junior red pot. And so we see it. This is the first turns into the hole. Framing it with Centerpole in the background. The end goal there. And it actually, the hole dug very well this year. It's there was some rain, which helped tamp down the surface, but there wasn't enough rain to really get it down deep, which made it so surprising that the ground was just so thick and solid, so far down, and really made a very nice clean hole. And it looked like it had been wet down there, but it couldn't have been. We haven't gotten a lot of rain as we've seen this entire year. It's been very, very dusty. Even just as recently as unloading Centerpole, it has been really, really dry and dusty. And the auger was going down very cleanly, and as if the ground was wet. But really what we're dealing with, and we'll look here, point here, this is a representation of what the year's been like. This is perimeter. Very dry, very dusty. We saw it in the logs that loaded and everything, and yet the hole was just a thick clay. And so what the deal is, what I'm getting at, is that every year Centerpole moves 10 feet. And so Centerpole, you find that Centerpole is all of a sudden cutting into a different substrate than you remembered paying attention to from a few years before. And we tapped into here what is a very clay, very hard spot that was it just made a very it was a very different hole than last year, and that's just illustrative of the moving of the architecture every year. so that you're never putting a center pole directly on top of another center pole. These are still the first turns. And and we'll look at it a little bit later, but at a certain point in the night, I broke out the flash just to try and touch some light on some things, and again trying to do it as naturally as possible. But it occurred to me while this was happening, and this was familiar, and I'd already gotten the thing going into the ground, and I got it turning, and blah blah blah. Let me make sure that my flash is still. I've got that hooked up and wired in before it gets dark and I need it. So I kind of popped that off real quick. Totally not an intended photo to keep. I just remembered my flash attached to me, and hold on, let me check that real quick. So we've got the throwing off of the dirt. The next time they threw off the dirt, that first time they were throwing it off right by the hole, and so I wasn't actually prepared for them to throw the dirt here, because he just pulled it out and just threw it out of the way. And I'm usually used to them pulling the dirt off to the side, and so all of a sudden there he is throwing the dirt right at me. But for the next ones, they did pull the dirt off to the side, and we're going to see that's going to turn into a very big pile of dirt. And here's the batten fella. I always like to get photos of something clearly batten for them, because I do appreciate what they do, and I want them to have something to kind of show off what they've done. And also that it's not just the logo, but Batten is bringing out people, people who Bonfire would identify with, people who know what they're doing and proud of what they do and doing it well. So I'd like to get a shot of their people. So we see the hole starting to develop, and in the meantime, all right, so this kind of becomes the moment where about the time where, all right, so we're digging a hole. I get it, we're digging a hole. So let's go and see what the rest of the crews are doing again. And we see the crews playing around, playing games. Here's a pelt. Go back in and check on the hole and see. Look at this, perfectly clean. That's a pristine Centerpole hole. And so the thought that actually occurs to you, and I don't know if this actually had anything to do with Andrew Pikowski being there and reliving that memory, but it was in 2014 that in digging the hole, it accidentally wound up on top of where a previous window stick hole had been, and so it was digging into the wood from a previous year's pole. And so there was the concern about, oh, what do we do about that? And that was a time that really got a lot of people's attention, and it was a memorable time. And digging this hole was going so well that Andrew and I were, we both started talking about the previous, that year that we had experienced with him, and that nervous little incident. And I don't know if he was like me. I was thinking, this is going so well that something, it's got to be throw us a curveball here. And gosh, I think it was about that time that we said, man, remember that time? I sure hope we don't hit another pole again. Turns out that this drilling run went perfectly, as good as it's ever gone. Completely uneventful. Now, in the middle of that, I turned back around, and what had been, one level of fun became 3 levels of fun, but it was very far away, and I was trying to get that photo very quickly. I wasn't going to make it by running over there, so I just zoomed, which limited my ability, limited my options on the exposure, and so we see it's kind of mucked up there, but one of these will work. So there's the pole. Again, we see the sort of the focus of everything. The green pots and the brown pots kind of dialed in on this is taking shape, where it's about to start hitting the fan. That kind of just that focus of this is probably like this is the one moment really that's unique in Bonfire, and that the students really don't have anything to do. There's very important work that's being done, and they're not actually doing anything, which is when you think about it, it's very unique in Bonfire. They're watching somebody else with a machine dig a hole. That's not something that the Bonfire Building Aggie ever does any other time except for now. Maybe that's part of what makes it so nervous. It's completely foreign. Now here's FHK with their flag that will be affixed to Centerpole. So we got the pole in the background and the flag that's going to end up on top of it. Excuse me there. I kind of like this, right? But then again, it doesn't actually. This doesn't actually mean anything, whereas this one does. To me, at least, because this one's actually got the pole in it. The other one's just somebody, and there's a machine. But this one, to me, I see the flag and then where it's going to end up, and so that's kind of the one we're going to use. And they measure the progress on the Centerpole hole the same as we saw them measuring the progress on the perimeter pole holes. Obviously, this is just a hole that's much bigger. So here they've called for FHK. So it's about this point that I don't know if I have any pictures of this. We saw we looked at that photo from 2014, and the writer and the photographer who were there, and so we just saw the back of the photographer. I know that somewhere in my photos from that year, not on the website, but I know that somewhere in the photos that I took over the course of that year, I do have photos of the photographer with his assistant. I don't believe I published any of those photos, but I know I have some. I'd dig them up for you now and show you those if we weren't already looking at an hour and a half. So, one day I'll show you what I'm talking about. But suffice it to say, the photographer had an assistant, and the whole time he was taking photos, he would talk to his assistant, Max here, Max there, Max closer, farther, up, down, and his assistant was running around with this flash and hitting things with light in really unique ways that were very interesting to see how he did it and what those photos turned into. And I was just very, very impressed by it. And I've always just kind of I've always kind of said that I want to take photos with the light that's available, in the same way that I don't want to develop my photos and do much tweaking to them very much. Um, I also don't want to um, mess with the light in the photos, and so I guess the terminology in groups of photographers is, that's a natural light photographer or whatever. And so I've always kind of said that I don't want to mess with light, um, or add light or introduce light that's not already there. But there's also a case to be made that is that's amateur talk, right? That well, the reason why you're not adding light is because you don't know how to add it in a way that looks natural. Arguably true, but that's always been my justification, though, is I don't want to add light that's not there and wind up changing what it is that I'm seeing and what everybody else is experiencing. But I saw Frederick work with light in a way that was it provided some change, but it was still natural, and it was still impactful, and it was really, really cool. And that light was coming from this human tripod that he had running around his assistant, Max. So Max here, Max there, Max there. And Max was so in tune with Frederick that he really only had to put himself in position, and then Max would pretty generally put himself where he was supposed to be. And it turned into some really cool stuff. And so when it was all over, when we were getting towards the end, I asked the photographer if about his assistant. I said, so is he an apprentice or something? And he said, well, yeah, I mean, he's sort of an apprentice. And I said, well, what does he want to be? And a photographer, and he told me what he wanted to be, and it was very loosely photographer. And so I was confused, and I said, so how did you get him? And he kind of looked at me differently, and then he realized. He said, "Oh, that's Max is my son." I had no idea. I had no idea this entire time. It was his son. He had had apprentices and assistants before, but here was Max, his son, working with him on this. And all of a sudden, I wished that I'd known this the entire time, because that's the coolest damn thing I'd heard. His son coming out here and working with him on this stuff. And I was so motivated by it and so impressed with how they work together as a father and a son that I told the photographer, if I ever have an assistant, I will call them Max. And I'm certainly not going to have an assistant on his level. I'm not going to be an internationally traveling photographer who has an assistant that I bring with me. But if I'm ever out at Stack and I have an assistant, I say all that to say this. This is the first time that I had an assistant. And I gave him my flash because I had forgotten my tripod at home, but I was always limited because I can't move my tripod and I don't want the light anywhere near me. And so we're going to see in some of these photos that I had an assistant who was able to help me provide a little bit of light that I tried to do as naturally as possible. And as I promised the photographer, my assistant was called Max. So it was fun, actually, to run around Stack and be hollering, Max, Max, here, there, hold it up, point it this way, point it that. And honestly, he did a really great job. He was a photographer. He's a photographer himself, and so he knew what I was getting at. And I don't know, maybe he can be my Max for the rest of the year or something. Returning to the point, we're going to start seeing some of the photos that have a little bit of light added onto them here pretty soon. But first, there there's FHK getting ready to affix their flag to Centerpole, And what they've done is what a lot of crews will do. Um, what a lot of crews will do when they're, pardon me, I gotta sneeze. Oh my goodness. I was desperately trying to find the mute button. So they will do what a lot of crews who earn the Centerpoles will do, and that is to put the names or the initials or reference to members of that crew who passed in '99. So um, when FHK puts their flag up, the Corps has done it, um, and other crews have put the initials on. Um, but in many, if not all, Centerpole flags that go up have some reference to '99, and it's particularly poignant with FHK because um, because they have three with Jamie Lynn Hand and Michael E. Banks and uh, Chad Powell that were residents of FHK when and passed when Bonfire fell in '99. And I wanted to make sure, even if I didn't get a shot that was great, they are in a hurry. They do have to get this on the pole quickly. Um, so I can't exactly take the time to take up everybody's time to frame it. But again, if for no other reason than just to have it for memory, um, I did want to get a photo of those initials on the flag. And I've said it before. I've said it many, many times before, but it impresses me to no end how deeply and authentically and powerfully connected these students are to students that they never knew. Um, and as an old Squadron 16 butt pot once told me, I come out here because it's out here that I can know Tim Curley. And I know that a lot of people feel the same. It's coming out and doing this that they know these other people who, at this point, it's not going to be very long at all before me, their age. Um, Michael Ebanks was, I believe he was '03, and anybody who knows, I hope I'm not wrong, but I believe Michael was '03. I believe Jamie Hand was '03, and I think everybody in FHK, now that I'm thinking about it, I think everybody in FHK when it fell was '03. And I'm class of '03, and I'm not very far from having kids who are going to Texas A&M. And that's the distance. That's the time that separates these generations, and yet these names and these Aggies are vividly remembered. So here they are, uh, tying the flag. A very well done flag, by the way. This is very nice. I don't know who did this, but this is very, very nice. I might have them make me a comforter. I mean, this is wonderful work. And here, um, you see the glow there, the brightness on the vest. That's Max. That's Max with the flash. So at this point, me and Max are still um, learning how to work together. He can't come inside perimeter, so he is some distance away, and I'm really hammering the the flash when I am trying to use him, I'm really hammering it, trying to get that light from where he is outside of perimeter in a natural way. I can't have him standing here because the light is either here at this pole or a light way back in another corner on another pole. I can't have him standing here and hitting it, or it wouldn't look very natural. But we finally kind of worked something out here, and he is now kind of in a position, and I've got the flash, and he's pointing it the way I want it, so that we see a light that is natural, that's coming from an angle that makes sense, this light pole that's back here. And so I liked how that turned out. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about trying to make light, trying to add light in a way that makes sense. But in between the playing around, we got a bunch of photos like this, trying to get in sync, Max and I. And so this was, I did something here that wasn't exactly, this was something different, right? I put Max in a position that was not where the light normally comes from, but I wanted to see about what it would look like to set the junior red pots off in space in this way, by hitting them with light that is not completely unreasonable, because there's a light pole right here, but we see from the shadows that the light is not necessarily coming from there. But I wanted to try and play with setting them off against everything else, making everything else comparatively darker, and kind of putting them alone in space. And I actually liked how those worked out. The junior red pots in their center pole. And what they're doing is they're waiting for a red light, this red light. And that's where they're going to get their final instructions for the lay of the land before Centerpole goes in. And so they're sitting there waiting together, and then the light will go off, and they'll run, and they'll go get their last instructions before. And here they are coming out, and the traditional practice of hammering Kleins into the very, very top of Centerpole. And at this point, the senior red pots get tight with each other towards the top end of Centerpole, and the junior red pots get tight with each other towards the base of Centerpole. And they wait for the Centerpole to come off the chalks, to jump in and start doing their work. So, I've got Max, again, trying to provide a little bit of light on the situation, again, in a way that hopefully makes sense. And I'm actually pretty happy with a couple of those. And now the pole is starting to come off the chalks. The truck has positioned itself in kind of a different way this year. So it was taking a long time for the pole to come off the chalk, while the junior red pots sit tight and wait for it to hit the ground. And it was very unusual. You see how close the pole is to the ground here. I'm focusing on them. I'm not photographing what's taking so long with the pole, but it was just a matter of angles. And the angles were such that the pole was having a very hard time coming off that last chalk. And of course, when I turned around to see what was going on with the pole, that is when it came completely off the chalk. And so I missed them running towards the pole, but that's okay. in times like these, I'm kind of torn between um, taking the pictures as an observer, um, but also being there as somebody who knows the job and observing how the situation is going and providing input or whatever on the situation, or at least trying to understand it a little bit better. So sometimes, in stuff like this, if I were just there to observe, there would be different photos. Um, but with the angles and everything that was causing the center pole to come off the chalks in an unusual way, a way that it worked, but a way that was different than what it's been seen before. I was paying a lot more attention to the pole and the rigging and all that than I was to taking a whole lot of pictures. But I still feel like we got like this one. I love this one. And this is the juniors guiding the center pole towards the hole. And they're almost there. So there's a few there of them guiding it in that will work. At this point, I ran over to the seniors to see them. Max came and he did a great job. I don't think I even had to tell him anything for this one. He went directly to the perimeter pole and put the flash coming from an angle roughly that the light was coming from the perimeter pole anyway, which made it a kind of a natural way to illuminate the red pots. So we see the pole trying to work its way into the ground. And what ended up happening was that the angles on the truck and the way they were grabbing the center pole, and they kind of grabbed it kind of, I don't want to say far down, but a little bit farther down the pole than before, and that made it so it was very hard to get the pole to drop into the hole. And so something that doesn't generally happen, they had to reposition the cables. And once they repositioned the cables, they were able to get the angle right to get that pole to go into the hole, which actually kind of presented a cool opportunity to be able to catch the pole going into the hole from an angle that I've never caught it before, which is not from behind or next to with the juniors, but almost in front. So from a taking the photo perspective, that was pretty cool. So there it is going in there. And these are all the juniors and senior red pots standing at the hole. And this becomes a process of getting the pole centered in the middle of the hole. While they're doing this, brown pots are wheeling the chalks out of perimeter to get them out of the way. We see in the background reds, dead red pots from before, helping get the ropes laid out. So while Centerpole is going in the hole, there's also all this bustle of activity that's going on otherwise inside of perimeter, clearing everything that is no longer needed from inside perimeter, while they continue to work on getting that pole in the hole. And the pole this year is actually a more uniform thickness from top to bottom. Usually there's more of a taper at the top, making it skinnier at the top. I felt like it was thicker all the way through, and the previous head stack who was there told me that it was actually the exact same diameter at the bottom, or by about 10 feet up. It was the same diameter that it was the year before, but it was a more uniform thickness all the way to the top. So it kind of looks stubbier. But in any event, there was more weight to deal with. And so it was a little bit of a longer process getting the pole centered on the hole. And it's always fun to watch them try and wrestle with it, because you are wrestling with it, getting it centered. And it's not a whole heck of a lot of fun. This was one that I hope turned out. I hope, yeah, that's one of the juniors, um, Jacob, the head stack junior, staying in contact with the pole there. I like this one as well. And of course, um, you always got to go back to, when possible, getting that other layer, the Aggie Bonfire trailer in the background to kind of complete that story. Now, what they had to do, um, was, as the pole went up and with the readjusting and everything, the ropes, which had been very meticulously laid out so that they would sort of fall in the right place, you lay them out as meticulously as you can every year to try and get them to kind of go in the right place when the pole goes up, but sometimes the pole turns. In this case, the pole was readjusted. In any event, you had the ropes needed some reconfiguration after the pole was already up. You certainly couldn't lift the pole out. You see where it's tied here. You certainly couldn't lift it out of the ground and redo it. So they brought in the boom lift, again, another generously donated piece of equipment, um, and they took the boom lift up and reran the ropes through to get them going where they needed to go. And I told somebody down on the ground, I said, you watch, y'all going to take your time and you're going to go up there and you're going to put those ropes out, and uh, you're going to feel really good about where you got those ropes, and then you're going to realize that you got one of them in the wrong place. I was joking, just trying to pick on nervous people, I guess. And it turns out that's what happened. They did have to take the boom up one more time and reconfigure one of the ropes. So still working on centering the pole. At this point, when they reconfigured the cables, they did kind of move everybody back away from perimeter. But this is everybody getting to come back to perimeter. FHK. And at this point, actually, no, they are inside perimeter. Everybody else, if you look in the background, you see Kruger has come to their pole, but FHK has been brought in, so they're getting ready to start tamping. Usually, I get photos of people waiting around perimeter, um, before the tamping starts, while the pole's being centered, but because of all the excitement and the reconfiguration, there wasn't that opportunity this year, as the crews were kind of pushed back away from perimeter a little bit. But, at this point, we're back with everybody in their positions, the different crews at their poles. The juniors are now finished with getting the pole where it goes, and the crews are now on their ropes. And this begins the process of getting center poles straight. And I believe here, yeah, here we see somebody on the plumb bob. So this is the plumb bob that was opposite of the one we saw earlier. We see Max is providing me with a little bit of light from this direction. You can sort of tell it. This is a more white light than what the rest of the light is, but you can tell this is where the light's coming from Max. But here's how the plumb bob works. You lay there on the ground and you look at the plumb against center pole. And what will happen is throughout the night, the junior red pots in the center will look to their plumb bobs out on the edges, out on perimeter, and we'll ask them what direction center pole needs to go. So here's another view of that plumb bob. Here's the core at their pole. And continuing that thought of what FHK did with their flag, we see the Corps has done that with their perimeter pole flag. We also, writing the names of those who were in the Corps who were lost in '99. We also see their gigantic crater of a fire pit that they made that would eventually be filled in and moved over to over here. Walton at their pole. And I was trying to get that from a different angle. This is me just trying to get what I missed earlier, which was the insignia on the flag. And I don't know, I might have to wind up coming back later to see if I can get that. We're back over at Kruger. And it was while I was over here that I had the idea of doing something I don't normally do, but playing around with putting Max in a position to light up the trailer in the background. I just played with that just a little bit. So, there's a few in there. We did that for a little bit of time, just playing around. But that might be an experiment we have to repeat later. But that's Kruger's corner and Max with the, I've got the remote flash set up and he's moving around and we're just trying to light up the trailer a little bit in the background. Or a lot of it, actually. We see the tamps laid out here on the ground for FHK. Getting ready to tamp. There's a better view of the tamps without people in the way. A little bit too much there. And again, this is just me being stubborn. Kruger was a dark corner, so it was very hard for me to get their flag when more light becomes available again, when stack is there to reflect more of the light. I am going to go back and get Kruger's flag, which is another one that's very well put together. It looks very cool. I'm going to get theirs. I'm going to get Neely's in a little bit more detail. But I really felt like Walton had enough light over in their area that I could get the flag as it is without having to wait. And I tried this a few times this night because everything was there. I should have been able to pull it off. And we did get pretty close. I think maybe one of these will work. But certainly the other crews, when more light is available, we're going to have some really cool photos of their flags as well. and we see the sort of how the rigging is going to come together. This is very close to what it is ultimately going to look like. We can't see the fourth red rope going this way to that pole there in the background, but we see the ropes to the quadrants, and these will be the pull ropes for the logs. We see the red rope situation. So we're pretty much in the architecture that we're going to have for stack. Just by stack, those red ropes are going to be fully attached to the perimeter poles. But that's that familiar, almost rope TP situation coming together. And I think now we're getting into where we actually have tamping happening. And so this is how they do it, just an inch or two at a time. And what similar to the situation that we saw with the perimeter pole holes and filling those in with a few shovelfuls of dirt and a few splashes of water, and then tamping them in with those big heavy poles, keeping in mind that hole is 15 feet deep. So what they've got here, what they're working on, is a pole that's 17, 18 foot long, and that's a solid steel, a thick walled steel pole that's being picked up and dropped on a few inches of dirt at a time. And I don't think maybe I got it here. That is water from a pot. That's not a good shot. It's not clear what's happening there, but we see that's water being poured from a pot. And so they're also running out to the pond out there in the distance to go get some water throughout the night as they continue to pour a few shovelfuls of dirt in, splash it with some water, tamp it down hard as concrete with that big pole. All night long. Pardon me. So we added a little bit of light here. It was very dark on the inside, but I still wanted to be able to get that and illustrate that. So we did add some light. In years past, the truck has pulled up. Sometimes the truck has pulled up in a way that the truck lights provide some light. But this year, the truck lights were pointing directly out of perimeter, and so we didn't get the benefit of their headlights, making it very dark inside here, inside perimeter. But I think we managed to make something of it. The plumb bobs, this is, I believe this was the Lechner Yellow that was monitoring this plumb bob. Here's Neely, and I tried to get something from Neely. The flag was actually blowing into the light, and so I felt like I could get something out of that. This is going to be, no, actually, I feel, wow, I was afraid I was going to have to, I'll come back, always come back, but I feel like this is actually pretty good. Neely's yellow at the front of the rope. that all of that dirt that's sitting outside that hole, all of that is going back into the hole. So to get a picture of just how compact that earth is around the pole, this pole, the pole itself, takes up a good bit of space of that hole. And yet all of this dirt that came out of the hole is going to fill up that hole to the top, even though there's all this wood that's taking up space. Um, and so what that means is that dirt is going down into that hole and being compacted far tighter than it already was before, and it was tight before, as we saw in what that hole looked like as it was being drilled. And what we're seeing here, we're seeing some different light coming from different angles. We see some headlights here in the background. Uh, one of the wires was tripped, and so two of the light poles went out. And almost immediately, vehicles were brought to perimeter to shine some light in so that the work could continue. Didn't even slow things down as far as tamping goes. Not one bit. Wanted to get batting. I had to kind of change my setup there so that my shadow didn't wind up in the shot. But this is another one, for batting. Though it doesn't actually look bad as a shot on its own merits, I think. The junior red pot's conferring, having a little moment. And ultimately, I believe, concluding the night of photos, at least, for raising Centerpole. And I'm going to confirm here real quick that that's true. That's what we got. Yeah, that finishes it. Those are the photos from Centerpole raising. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back through the photos that we viewed and those that I flagged, and we're going to make sure that we've selected the right ones there, and we're going to develop those that are worth sharing to the world, and we'll get that posted to the website. dion-c.me. dion-c.me is the gallery where you will find those photos. As I said, tomorrow night, or possibly Thursday, we'll jump back on again and we will look at the photos from Dress Log Cut, which was very motivating. That was also Truck Stick Load, which went very well and was also very motivating, and an essential skill in building Bonfire that I was very happy to see the crews earned the opportunity to do again through their motivation and discipline and everything they've done throughout the year, from the way they've conducted themselves in the woods to their adherence to all of the protocols and everything that have been in place in this very weird 2020 year. Everything about how everybody has conducted themselves has been exemplary, and in my opinion, at least informed the decision to do a truck stick load again, which hasn't been done in some time, to cap off a very motivating year. So that round of photos again, I stayed out there for the entire day for Dress Log Cut, and it was a big Dress Log Cut, and it was a very good one. So we're going to look at those photos tomorrow or Thursday, and then Chief Stack is going to be very soon, and then the first official stack of the year is going to be on Friday, And then from this point forward until last shift, all of the photos are going to be stack, stack, stack until it's all done. So follow along, subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow along on dion-c.me, on Twitter at DionC on Facebook at DionC on Instagram, though follow Student Bonfire's Instagram. They post more of my photos on their Instagram than I do of my photos on Instagram these days. And your support for the gallery is appreciated at Patreon, patreon.com/DionCgallery. And of course, there's nothing to take photos of if you don't support Student Bonfire. StudentBonfire.com is going to have all the information you need on supporting Student Bonfire. Your support there is invaluable as well. So appreciate your motivation. Appreciate those of you who are building the hell out of Bonfire this year. I appreciate all your work. Very, very, very motivated by everything that you do, as is Aggieland. So thank you very much for joining me, and I hope to see you again soon. Build the hell out of Bonfire. Aggies, gig 'em.